Hello, and welcome back to Mastering Retail, a podcast masterclass teaching you how to succeed in the world of e-commerce, brought to you from Essential Digital Commerce. If you've been around a while, you're probably wondering where the funny intro clip that usually comes before this is, but don't worry, our signature style of humor and also informative and educational e-commerce content will come throughout this episode. If you're new here, my name is Emma Irwin, and I'm a senior editor and specialist at Essential. In this episode, we're going to learn about how a brand can approach building the right e-commerce capabilities using a 3-question framework built by our friends at firstmovr. With that, let's meet our guest for this episode.
My name is Chris Perry. I'm the Chief Learning Officer and co-founder at firstmovr.
And what does firstmovr do? What is firstmovr?
So firstmovr is here to serve the industry as a satellite center of excellence for what we'd like to say CPG next commerce, whatever that is, e-commerce and beyond, education, but also change management. And we do everything from industry events to custom trainings and certifications to also digital transformation and e-commerce advisory.
Okay. Something we ask everyone is, what is the last thing that you purchased online?
Ooh, well, I always love that question too, whenever I've had a chance to ask. So the cool one that was literally in the last bunch of things that I bought were cowboy hat stands for my office. And the reason is not because I'm a cowboy, but I'm a want-to-be cowboy. My wife and I have taken our 7 and 9-year-old boys on a number of Western driving trips to the American West, I would say. And with that comes the natural visit to the rodeos. And so we actually went to the San Antonio Rodeo in February. And when you go, you're among like 12,000 people that are decked to the nines in cowboy gear, and you have to match them. So we came home with a lot more gear than we expected. And then I realized I kind of wanted to put them up so at least I could remember what it was like to wear such a cool hat. So since you can't really do that in the greater Boston area, so easily. So that's what we bought, were hat stands.
That's awesome. How many cowboy hats do you have then?
I have 5 hats because we've been to a lot of rodeos, and every time you travel, if you don't bring the one you already had, you have to get a new one. So, but I've got one of every color and shade, so I'll be very stylish.
I love that. I think that might be my favorite answer to the question so far. I love a good cowboy hat, and not just the hat stand, because what is a hat just sitting on a flat surface when it could be on a stand?
If it can't be on my head, it needs to be on a fake head that sits next to my desk. So, but I'm very inspired by that Paramount's Yellowstone and 1883 and 1923 shows that have been coming out, and that kind of has inspired me to be more to channel my inner cowboy, even though I'm just a Virginian who moved to Boston. So.
Last question before we get into actual e-commerce related things, but I'm going to ask it now. We'll come back to it at the end, but something that is on a digital wish list of yours, and if you say hats, I'm going to laugh at the end, but something that just you won't actually purchase and why it lives in a tab, in an app, etc. But don't answer now. We'll come back to it if that sounds good.
Sounds good.
I mentioned a 3-question framework that firstmovr has built for how to pick the right e-commerce capabilities as a brand, and it goes like this. What are the capabilities? How do we choose the right capabilities? And what capabilities do we really need to build the ecosystem? So of course, we're starting with question 1, but with my twist of what do we actually mean by building capabilities? And then what are the capabilities?
That's an awesome question. And it's silly. When I hear the word capabilities, it's tossed around like a catchphrase. And it's like, and half the people don't even know what it means. It's like, we need capability. And you're like, all right. Everyone is actually capable as human beings. But capabilities can mean many things. Obviously, at a macro level, it could be internal organizational skills, the actual talent on the team, structure, ways of working can be a capability, technology, tools, anything that enables someone to do something at all, if not better than others. But it's also a lot of the external capabilities, right? The tech, the tools, the partners, the services that would help us plan, activate, or measure any kind of business. And so now, when we're talking about capabilities and what we'll talk to today, we're kind of talking about those more often the external tech tools and partners and services needed to plan and activate and measure in digital commerce business day to day, right? Both on annual activation, but also that day-to-day business management. And I would say it could be an internal capability. There are some people, and we'll talk to, who might have in-house designers that do product content, for instance, for the digital shelf. But there's a lot of outside expertise and tech that can enable brands to stay up on the latest thing without having to own that innovation themselves.
So how could one or a whole brand possibly know what all of their options are? Because, if you Google e-commerce agencies, it's not necessarily the best suite of what you're looking for your specific brand, or if you're enterprise, you're going to need a different kind of set of capabilities. How could one possibly know?
That's an awesome question, and it's literally been the challenge to date, right? I mean, so I think because even if you did look up e-commerce capabilities or agencies, you might get Google results more from a seller who sells direct to consumer, right? So you might not get it from a CPG or consumer goods brand. So naturally, like because we've been in e-com for over a decade now for most CPGs, whether they realized it or not, we have been. There have been some natural go-to capabilities that now seem second nature subliminal options, right? Digital shelf analytics, retail media tech and service capabilities that many of us are aware of. So, like, arguably, we know they're important, whether we know all the nuances of them. I think the challenge, though, is most of us would have only learned of new ones from scanning LinkedIn for something that might have been targeted to us, hearing about it at a trade show or a conference where someone was speaking from a new technology that was available or a new agency that was available, or asking some friends or peers in the industry, right? What are you using, right? Obviously, where it was non-compete, non-confidential. That's not bad, but that's not a structured, comprehensive view. And there really haven't been a lot of resources out there that we've seen that really did that well, that didn't seem self-serving. I'm not knocking other agencies, but usually when an agency puts it out, they put themselves in the center of it, hoping that they gave you value and you remember them. And that's not wrong. That's the Trojan horse approach. It works. But we kind of thought, why not put something together, try to be comprehensive, try to be independent of it in the sense of we're not trying to favor any one company, but lay out what the landscape really looks like at a snapshot in time for North America. We started with that, but you could do that for any region or market. And that's really what motivated us to build this Trilliant Value Scape that we put out as a free resource just to help educate what's out there, how it works together, and how you would even choose a capability.
And what does the Trilliant, because we're a podcast here, the Trilliant Value Scape is? It's kind of like a triangle Venn diagram sort of thing going on, but I'm sure you have a better explanation of like what you're actually looking at when you look at the Trilliant Value Scape.
So it is triangular diamond shape, and it actually, we didn't design it that way on purpose. We actually initially laid out all the different processes, or kind of, I would say it's like the entities and the processes in between within the ecosystem, if you will. So when you think of, you start with your assortment, and you've got to get that to a shelf, both in store and online. And then you've got to get the shopper to the shelf. And in brick and mortar, it was very linear, right? I mean, I'm not saying it was easy, but it was linear. And then there was data would come back, obviously from the shelf to the brand who owned the assortment based on the shopper's behavior. But then we realized, well, now content and assortment aren't the same thing because it's not packaging alone anymore. It's content on the digital shelf. And then there's other types of content like user generated content. So when you actually realized it was 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional, it actually became this triangle shape. And when you laid out all the capabilities, it was like it almost just fit perfectly. Like we literally were like whiteboarding how it all worked together. And without trying to, it became this triangle shape. And then as we laid out all the capabilities, it started feeling like there were different angles on it. And I said, that looks like one of those like triangular diamonds. What's that called? And then we found the word trilliant. And so we thought, hey, that's kind of a cool thing to call. So, and it actually plays off the theme around, if you do all of these correctly, your business can shine like a diamond.
If there were no such thing as copyright laws, Rihanna's line would go here. But you'll just have to imagine. Sigh.
The nerd marketer in me found the connection to the shape that it naturally took shape in. And eventually down the road, it might take a different shape, obviously, as there's other angles. But right now, it just felt like a nice way that actually had meaning to the madness of how everything flows together versus some of the other things I've seen in industry today that sometimes feel a little bit like a vomit of logos on a page with no structure to it. Like, it's like, here's everything you need. And you're like, great, but where do I start? Oh, I don't know. Here's all the logos. Good luck. And we tried to put it into something that at least felt like you could navigate it and see how it all worked together. So we just want to democratize this because I know we'll talk to a little bit more here wherever you want to go with it. But there's as we were saying, like there's kind of like these 3 questions, but it's like the what capabilities are out there, how do they work together, which ones do I need, and arguably it goes a little further, in what order do I need them, and how do I build them out together. And so the problem is people are at various different parts of that journey, and sometimes it's almost like chutes and ladders where they actually go backwards because they might have inherited a business with an ecosystem, but then they have to go back and replace things and move things. So it creates, this is, as I know Amanda Wolf at one space, within the Essential family here, always says, like, content is not a project, it's a process. And I always liked that. I think the whole thing is a process, right? None of these are,
Yep.
I might get a capability, but it's a process to manage them, sustain them, and then decide when they change over.
Yeah. Great. It's so much. It's
It
overwhelming.
is.
But that's why there's podcast episodes like this to
Help
understand what's
keep it calm,
to help.
We can listen to some
calm.
Zen music, light some candles, just relax. We're going to make it through.
I'll whip out my little like desk sandbox that I can like grooming like my sand yard as my meditation.
Yeah, no, I've got cacti over here to, again, bring in more of that American West
Western,
theme.
yeah.
So
with that small pause for clarity and calmness over, we're going to get moving again with question number 2 in the thought process of building the right e-commerce capabilities. How does one choose who to work with and with what capabilities? Does every brand need every capability? Special prize for anyone who counts how many times I say capabilities in this episode. I'm doubting that the good old Google search is actually the best method here.
again, not to make it complicated, but also not to make it sound so simple that you're like, why am I not doing it perfectly? Because it is complicated. There's a science and an art to it, right? But there's kind of a couple parts to this, at least two. One is, okay, I know what's out there. I know what kind of capabilities are out there. Obviously, I'm aware of some of the logos, the names of the companies I am already working with or could be working with in this space, or who may be innovating into this space. So there's the micro and the macro, right? So on a micro level, once I know I need digital shelf analytics, or I know that I need shopper insights, online shopper insights or brand protection services, I now need to go through a capability lifecycle process, right? I need to arguably, something prompted the need, right? It might have been me looking for it. It might have been the current capability isn't working as well, or we have a problem and we learned of a solution that can solve that problem. But we have our own like capability lifecycle process that we kind of teach to or advise to. There's kind of the initiation stage, whatever prompts the need. There's evaluation, which might be a formal RFP of the capabilities, right? Sending out invites to all the different digital shelf analytics organizations to pitch for a capability. Then once you've chosen one, obviously, which goes through a number of steps to pick one, then there's the activation. And then we actually broke out measurement and sustainability. So like, how do I actually measure the immediate success of whatever I've activated? Not just is the tool doing what it's supposed to do, but how do I measure the tool measures something. Often there's metrics in the tool, but there's also measurement of the tool. Does it drive an ROI internally? And then there's the sustainability, because then as people change roles, did I retrain the team? Is there a lead, right? The lead on retail media left, and now we don't have someone. So who's going to take that baton while we pick the new person, or is there a new person, right? So there's the individual capability next steps within isolated capabilities. And then there's also the ecosystem, right? And we have recommendations, not specific companies necessarily, unless they're already working with them and there's some preferences for those. But we try to give very agnostic view of like, these can help you based on your needs and regions and categories and whatever, depending on what they're looking for. But it's, where are they in the journey and what capabilities should they have together, and in what order if they can't have them all at once, right? And so that's why I would say it's two-parter, because it's kind of the macro and the micro, depending on where you are in that next step journey.
In your experience, who from a brand is kind of making these decisions? Like, what role is that is usually at the point of making these kind of decisions?
That's a great question. So people matter a whole lot in this whole process. I would say, obviously, there's a lot more automation and tech. So there's always in the future, there may be fewer people, but doing different types of things. But in the short term, people are the people making the decisions here. Historically, the eComm team defaulted as the one who was, again, tasked with results that sometimes weren't always achievable based on inflated expectations and not, maybe lesser understanding of those pushing the goals on the team. So again, if I'm, oh my gosh, we're being asked for so much more retail media. We really need to make sure we're managing this and measuring this apples to apples as we start pushing more budget into a full funnel approach with our traditional media. I'm going to have to solve, I may be the one looking for a Flywheel Digital or other partners in this space to help me manage all of this effectively. As ecom though becomes commerce, and it's not just the ecom team who is trying to solve for all the problems, other leaders, right, naturally might be prompted. Sales capability teams, the IT teams, commercial executive leadership, the media team. So what's nice is the E is quickly becoming silent in e-commerce, as e-commerce is everyone's opportunity and or challenge. But historically, it was the ecom team that was really prompted with it's all on you to fix this. Well, okay, well, now I need help, and I'm going to have to go get someone new to help me. But usually, though, I see it's really interesting, and this is just kind of the last little point here, is procurement is now being brought in more often because a lot of these are big purchases. There's sizable, contracts. But the challenge is procurement doesn't always understand ecom, and ecom doesn't always understand procurement, right? Or the commercial leader. So you need this like little team of everyone. It can't just be the ecom team jumping into solution mode, because procurement may ask actually some really thoughtful questions, but procurement can't take it all over because ecom actually knows how ecom works. And so it has to be a village that brings this together. But historically, it's been ecom only. Now it's merging into other functions.
Okay, you've got a grasp on how to choose the right capabilities, and now you're ready for question 3, which is determining what is really needed and building that ecosystem that you've mentioned. Because I think, you can look at the Trilliant Value Scape. You don't need to sign up for every single thing, and you might already have some of these capabilities existing in-house. But if you have too many, I think you probably end up with this really fragmented operation. You got too many partners. It can't be an ecosystem. So what is your logical way to think through building this? And this is inspired by, if for anyone listening, if you go to the Trilliant Value Scape tab on First Mover's website and scroll to the bottom, there's a slideshow that walks you through this. But I'd love for you to audibly go through kind of the ways to be thinking about this.
If you started from scratch, there's a way to think about it. No one is totally starting from scratch. So everyone has like a fragmentation of some of these, but it does help to say, where would I start if I hadn't already started? And does that give me some ideas for how I could make my current combination of things better, right? Whether it be new partners, additional capabilities, in-housing something, outsourcing something. But in general, it may sound really basic, but generally, first you start with, where am I selling, right? So obviously, a lot of our CPG community is selling at almost every retailer in the mass grocery, drug, club, dollar outlets, right? Online on all of those retailers, including pure play marketplaces, again, like an Amazon. So that may not be that hard a question to answer, but for new brands who are starting out, they may be saying, I'm selling direct to consumer. Do I also do social commerce? Do I sell on an Amazon marketplace, right? So you got to be selling. You have to be in distribution. A lot of brands immediately jump to, and it's not illogical, but they jump to content and media, because naturally, once I'm selling online, the representation of what I'm selling is my content. And the way I get people to my page is through paid search and display and other types of demand generation. And that will generate results. I mean, you'll get some sales from that. I mean, you can't not. Just being in distribution alone gets you something. Then when you drive demand, you get something else. The problem is you don't know what you're getting or how well that is compared to others, how strong your performance is, and you don't know why you're getting, or how you're getting, or how someone else is getting. So that's actually, generally we say, start with where you sell, and that might be easy with platforms you sell on, marketplaces you sell on. Next, you need to make sure you have a good sense of, what are my outputs? What sales and share am I getting in this space? And there's a lot of different capabilities out there trying to give both real POS data, if not panel data, trying to extrapolate on how you're doing in the market. So I know my efforts got me the end result I wanted, ideally profitable sales and share. But then my next thing would be, well, what are my input metrics, right? What are my digital shelf metrics? Which is why digital shelf analytics have been around for a while, because if I don't know whether I have the right content across 1,000 SKUs, if I don't know if I have recent reviews on my products that are helping or detracting from my performance, if I don't know if I'm available across all my retails. I'm not going to know what is causing my outputs, good or bad. So I generally say where I'm selling, can I measure my outputs? Can I measure my inputs and measure and optimize that digital shelf? Now I'm in a place to do digital shelf content, drive more reviews and syndicate more reviews using Bazaar Voice or Power Reviews or any of the retailers' review programs. Now that and then at that point I've become retail ready. So I'm ready to convert at my maximum level. Now I'm in a position to do more retail media. Not that I shouldn't have done some already, but I can convert. I always say, like, as I'm sending fish down the stream, I can catch more fish in that net, right? So I need the net to be really strong so that as I pump more fish down that stream, I'm ready. Then I can expand that to shoppable media, right? More national media that says where to buy, or add to cart. Then I might want to understand more about my shoppers so I can go be more targeted, and that might be shopper insights. And then you get into some of the next level stuff about brand protection and commerce management, which is really where you can manage the metrics and the actions together for what we call closed loop management, right? Where cause and effect. And then logistics if you go direct to consumer. So every brand though might be in a slightly different mix. So that order may already be solved for some, but it might be, I missed one of those steps, or I really don't know the inputs. I only know the outputs, right? And so the idea is that it gives you an order of importance and then gives you a way to find gaps or opportunities that you can go back and fill or improve.
Have you considered writing a textbook? Because I think you should.
Well, it's a good question. So there's a lot of content in every area. And the one challenge I always find is textbooks, obviously, an academic approach to this is why we do a lot of training is an important one. The problem is, humans have the attention span of a goldfish. So the problem is, how do I get you to want to listen, want to, and can be able to retain or capture this data? And so the question is, like with Trilliant, the idea was almost like put out a visual that is so interesting, if nothing else, it's almost like a fire on the side of the road. I've got to stop and look at this. And oh, by the way, I'm kind of learning in a simple way how I could approach it. So it's that, how do I peel the onion in a way that's appealing, all puns intended. So this is worthy of a textbook. It's just a matter of how do I turn the textbook into something that is teachable, right? And then learnable, because I think most of us probably slept on most of our textbooks.
Everything that you just went through, it's kind of, my brain is going back to the conversation about how, like, when you're actually the people who have to actually pick these companies to work with and these capabilities. And that's just so much to think about. And someone who really knows media isn't going to understand necessarily some of the more retail heavy things and vice versa. And I don't think there's not like a clear-cut solution to that. But I am wondering, say you pick one, there's one company capability that you're working with and it's just not working. Is that, say you're going to switch over, how does that impact the entire ecosystem?
In general, and you may be the reason that something's not working. Like, I don't mean you're the reason it's not working. You may be the one determining something's not working. So you may have very good reason to believe this is true. But if you're assigned to something or you become part of a team and you're being asked to evaluate a specific capability, do that. But don't walk in assuming it's at fault. And I only say that because having been on the other side and even now of the other side of the industry, I'm not blaming brands or retailers, but they're not always right themselves, right? It could have been, again, hey, we set up this capability a year and a half ago. We had great ambition to train the team and assign leads and make sure people were accountable for using the tool and extracting its value and measuring its success. And then 3 people left the company, or 1 person rotated, and then there was nobody on it and nobody did the training. And then suddenly the tool, what does this tool even do? Well, it did something, and it was obviously of value to somebody not so long ago. It's just literally like dynasties change, and you're suddenly left with you've inherited this thing, or you're being told there's no ROI in this. Why? So it could be true, but do that due diligence. Walk in with kind of a completely independent, unbiased view, unless you're the one who's already done this evaluation. Then you could look at the fit, but make sure you're really understanding how it's not a fit or how it's not working, why it's not working. Ask people, dig in, and be open to the fact that it might be on your team, and not, like, again, not to blame. It's not accusing. It's just like, did we set that tool up for success? Because I have seen in my own experience as a practitioner on the CPG side, several capabilities that we failed. They didn't fail us. We failed them, but we got rid of them like a bad habit and blamed them and then picked somebody else and had the same issues because we hadn't solved, again, insanity is expecting different results from doing the same thing. And so it may be on us, but if it wasn't a fit, and to your point though, extracting, I almost think of like holiday lights, right? During the holidays, right? One light bulb out can knock out the whole. They're not supposed to anymore, but they still, some of the older light strands, you take one light bulb out or one goes out, the whole line goes out, right? And so the key though is now it's not just when I evaluate and go through that life cycle of a capability, I don't only think about the capability. I now have to think, okay, so some of that data used to feed into this other agency, or this agency was trained on using this tool as well, or hey, there was an automatic feed between these, or these were actually part of the same company, parent company, and we hadn't thought about how separating them out, how there's now a conflict of interest, or those are all things that are going to need to be thought through as part of that RFP process. And again, most of these capability partners this is not their first rodeo, going back to our earlier discussion around the American West, but it's an important nuance because it can't be RFP in isolation. It's got to be, I'm picking a partner to replace a partner who now has to work with these 7 different things. And this is how they all interconnect. And I need to know that you can plug into that and that we have a plan for that as well.
And now you have a better understanding of how to think about building digital commerce capabilities than you did before you press play. We covered the Trilliant Value Scape and its 3-question framework of what there is to choose from, how you choose, and how you determine what you really need, as well as what you can do if the ecosystem feels a bit off. To close this out, we're back to that one thing on Chris's wish list. And I really thought it was going to be a new color of a cowboy hat, but somehow it was even better.
Ooh, so this is going to sound silly, but so I lease a Jeep Wrangler because I actually got a deal that was the same as my Honda before. I got a really good deal. And so, but then my kids were like, Dad, it's like you're driving that one from the Jurassic Park movie, right? And so then I actually did buy decals, like legit decals, to trick this out. I wanted to go to that next level where they're actually like appendages you can add to the car to make it look like a dinosaur, like slice through the car. And then my in-laws were saying I should add like the inflatable raptor in the back that looks real. So I haven't bought those yet, but I did go halfway there. So I'm very close.
I really hope you buy those because I would love to just see that driving down the road. I think it would make my day.
Somebody at Dunkin' Donuts asked me if I'm on a movie set or whether it's just for fun. And I'm like, well, I could go there. It'd be cool to have that next movie if I could be an extra.
For sure.
But who knows? Well, if we can do a podcast on that next time.
Yes. Cowboy hats and dinosaur cars from Jurassic Park. With that comes the end of another episode of Mastering Retail. Thank you to Chris and firstmovr for joining us and for putting in the legwork to build the Trilliant Value Scape. This diagram is easily accessible from firstmovr.com, and I highly encourage checking it out to put a visual to what you just listened to. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate it, review it, share it, subscribe, follow us, the usual. I've been your host, Emma Irwin, and this episode was produced by Klaus Cancel with sound design from Enos Attention. See you next time.